Hi, this is Liz, and I just wanted to introduce this episode down by the River Ouse in York, with some nice boats in the background. This episode is about working towards a diagnosis for a type of dementia. I just want to try and introduce these episodes sometimes somewhere a bit different, so it gives you something to look at other than just me, and it just makes it more interesting. So I hope this helps some people with their journey. Okay, so let's get on with this episode. The first thing on the list really is mentioning it. So trying to tell your loved one that you feel that they've got a problem. So it could just be that they literally are just forgetting lots of things, so you just want to try and tell them that that's what they're doing, or they're repeating themselves a lot. It's a really hard thing to do, especially if that person thinks there's nothing wrong with them. So we found for our situation, telling mum or trying to tell mum that she needed help and she had a problem was so hard. So we really had to tread very carefully with mum to try and get her to the point where she would actually accept going to the doctors. So it was sort of a gradual process that we had to try and do in bits, so that it didn't feel like we were attacking her and sort of implying that she had something wrong, even though we knew that she did. So that was a difficult one for us, but you just got to do it in the best way that you can, and it's going to depend on what type of person you're dealing with. It could be somebody who's very practical, who's very happy to accept help, who's very happy to admit that they've got a problem, and it could be easy for you. It might not be, because I think by human nature, really, we none of us want to really admit that there's anything wrong with us. So I think for a lot of people it can pose a bit of a problem. We tried, and she would refuse lots of times to go to the doctors about this particular problem. So what we ended up having to do was if she was going to the doctors for something else, we would maybe go with her, so that we had a chance to try and tell the doctor in some way while we were there with her in the appointment that there was a problem with the memory, and we were starting to get concerned. Quite a few times we didn't manage to get the message across to the doctor. So what we ended up having to do in the end was make sure the doctor knew that we had power of attorney for health and welfare, which was the key thing. And then the doctor, would agree to talk to us. So we had various offline phone conversations with a couple of GPs in mum's practice, and that they agreed that next time they saw mum, they would try and do the basic dementia test and talk to her about it, and try and see what could be done. So that was the first thing, but we had to do that by stealth, really. So eventually, after numerous appointments, and it really was, it just felt like we were going to the doctors all the time, and having numerous appointments just to try and get this done. Eventually we did get a referral from the doctor and referred mum to the memory clinic. In some areas it might be called a memory assessment centre or something like that, but remember, I'm in the UK, in England, so different countries will have different procedures. So yeah, that was the getting her to the doctors. We saw various doctors. One doctor in particular was really good with mum, and mum liked this doctor, so that's how we eventually managed to get the referral through. Once we got the referral through, we then had to wait for the appointment to come through from the memory clinic. So eventually the appointment came through, and I was very lucky that the GP told me that had happened. I had requested to the memory clinic directly that any paperwork for any appointments would come to me, not to mum, because we knew if anything went to mum, she wouldn't like it. She would probably just throw it away, and we would end up with problems. So although I had requested that, unfortunately something went wrong and the paperwork did go to Mum. So unbeknown to me, Mum had received the notification of the appointment. I knew about the appointment because the GP told me about it. So I had it in my calendar and I'd taken the day off work and I was going to take Mum to this memory clinic appointment. I phoned up the day before to double check the appointment, double check the date, the time, the location, and I was told that Mum had cancelled the appointment. So that was a big blow, because obviously what we had tried to avoid happening had actually happened. So Mum had got the paperwork, Mum had been probably very confused about what the paperwork was all about. She didn't understand about what the appointment was for, and if she did, she just point blank refused to go, so she phoned up and cancelled it. So this is all part of unfortunately, Mum at that point was starting to lose her mental capacity and therefore didn't realise what was in her best interests, because she was in denial and she just didn't want to admit there was anything wrong with her. So from her point of view, I can see why she cancelled it, but my problem was it shouldn't have been allowed. She shouldn't have been allowed to phone up and cancel that appointment without at least me being notified, because the memory clinic also had a copy of the power of attorney for health. So they knew that I was Mum's power of attorney, and they knew that she was being referred for potential dementia diagnosis. So I don't get what went wrong. I really don't. So anyway, that's what happened. Mum had cancelled it, and unfortunately, the way the system worked, we had to go back to square one. We had to go back to the GP, get another referral in the system, and then wait again for another appointment to come through, which all took time, like it does. So the second time the appointment was made, the paperwork did come to me, but it also went to Mum. So at least they got a little bit more of it right. You know, I did get a copy of it. So as soon as I got the copy, my sister and I were on alert then, knowing that Mum's copy would probably come through at the same time or just after. So we did manage to intercept the post at that point, and I know it sounds deceitful, but you know, we had to do it for Mum's best interests, and we didn't show Mum a copy of that appointment. So at least that the appointment could go ahead. So when the appointment came through, I phoned up and requested that we had a home visit. The appointment was for a memory test with the, I think it's called Elderly Community Mental Health Team, and basically they had to do this big long test. Now I had heard that you could request for a home visit, and knowing what Mum would be like if we took her to this appointment at this place that, you know, had a big sign outside saying elderly mental health, we just thought a home visit would be so much easier. So thank goodness they did agree to do that for us. And a lovely male mental health nurse came out to Mum's house. I was there as well, but I wasn't allowed to be in the room while Mum was doing the test, which is fair enough. So I just went outside the room, and Derek did the tests with Mum. It was a series of paper-based tests, and you know, a number of different questions, all about different things. It tests things like the memory, obviously, orientation, language, visuospatial skills, such as, you know, copying shapes. So that there would be a shape on the paper and Mum had to copy that shape with a pencil. So, you know, various things on this paper. And then I think Derek talked to Mum a bit and maybe just made some notes as well while he was talking to her. These tests are very good at determining what type of problem there might be, and it might not always be dementia, it could be something else. But it does give them a good indication that there could be a problem with some sort of dementia. After that appointment where they came to the home, we had quite a gap. where things calmed down a bit, and everything was stable. And then we had the appointment through to go for the brain scan. So mum had to go for a brain scan to the hospital, and again that was another bit of a trauma, but we did manage to get her there, and actually she was okay with it. We just said, look, you just have to have a bit of a scan on your head just to make sure there's nothing wrong. So she accepted that, and we took her, and although it must have been scary for her, to go into a machine and have this brain scan, she coped with it well. So we had the brain scan, and then after that came a diagnosis appointment. So we got that appointment through, and yeah, the diagnosis appointment was not good at all. In order to get mum to the appointment, knowing that she would refuse to go if she knew where she was going, it was actually, the appointment was actually on my husband's birthday. So I hate to say it because it's awful, but we had to lie to mum. We had to pretend that we were going to go out to a nice cafe to have a birthday lunch for my husband, which we did. We did do that, so we weren't lying about that bit. But so we got her in the car, and we went to this place where the appointment was, which was the adult mental health services, and when we were on the way to the cafe, we just said to mum, we're just going to pop into this clinic because we just need to pick up some results for some of those tests that you had. And then we drove up to it, and it was just awful from there, really, because mum accused us of tricking her and didn't want to get out of the car. So we had to really use massive powers of persuasion to get her out of the car. We got her into the place, and we had this appointment with a consultant. Unfortunately, the consultant, his first language wasn't English, which in normal circumstances wouldn't be a problem, but with mum, mum's a little bit hard of hearing anyway, so she really didn't have a clue what he was saying. She apart from the fact that she had dementia, she just didn't understand the words that he was saying because his accent was very, very heavy. So it was very unfortunate, but obviously my husband and I understood what he was saying, and that's the point, the reason we were there, so that we could understand it. But it was a disaster because mum was just upset. She didn't understand why we were there, what this man was saying. We then went out to the appointment. We were given a load of leaflets, which we discovered was really the only aftercare we got. So I wasn't impressed at all. I'm very, very grateful to the NHS in the UK. They do some marvellous stuff. However, in this particular situation, we were basically sent away from this diagnosis appointment and left to fend for ourselves. So we were told about a charity called Dementia Forward, which I'd already been in contact with because I'd already done the research and found them. And yeah, we were just basically given a load of leaflets. So I really hope that if you're watching this and you're just about to go through this experience, that maybe whichever part of the UK you're in, you'll have a better experience than me. If it's looking like you're not going to, then while you're there, try and ask for more help, ask for possibly a social worker at that point, or ask for somebody to give you some more help. I was a bit naive at the time. I didn't push for anything like that. We just assumed that we'd get it. But like I say, it was very lacking, I'm afraid. One of the things we did come away from after the diagnosis was some tablets. So we got the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and one of the good things with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's is that there are some tablets that can be taken that do attempt to slow the disease down. So that was one of the main reasons that my sister and I continued to try and work towards a diagnosis for mum, because we knew that there was a chance of having these tablets and therefore getting a chance to have it slow down. If it hadn't have been for that and the fact that we knew that really we needed to get a diagnosis, we might have actually just abandoned it and just let things take their natural course, because it was becoming so hard to actually, you know, deal with mum and get her to these appointments. But anyway, she got some tablets prescribed called doneprazole or doneprazil, which is a very common one for Alzheimer's, but I do believe there are other tablets as well. So really that's this episode finished with. Only reason that these clinical people were able to talk to us properly about mum's health, which normally is a confidential issue, was because we did have the power of attorney for health and welfare, and we had to give copies of the power of attorney to all parties. You know, they normally want an original certified copy. They then take a copy for their system and give you the original back. So it was only because we had that in place was I able to, you know, get copies of the appointments and paperwork and talk to doctors without mum being there. So again, just stressing that it is important to get those lasting power of attorneys in place. So thanks for listening to this episode. You know, again, it's not a nice subject to discuss, but I'm attempting to discuss it all the same. The next episode is living with the early stages. Now, there's quite a lot to talk about with this, so I'm going to split it into two parts. I'm going to do part 1 and part 2 so that I'm not droning on for too long all at once. So I'll see you in the next episode.